I need help. And Shamika, Delano, TJ, somebody jump in here. There seems to be a group of people that they're calling Black Hebrew Israelites.
Yeah.
I don't, and this seems to be very offensive. These people, what they believe is very offensive, that they're arguing that black people are the original Jews or are the Jews. What is y'all, I don't, and I'm not playing dumb, I really don't understand why it's offensive, or I'm not even sure what's the logic behind the argument. Does anybody know? Can someone help me understand this issue?
In terms of what Kanye said, or in terms of Black Hebrew Israelite teaching?
Black Hebrew Israelite teaching. Is that X-Clan? Is that what, you remember the rap group X-Clan? You too young to remember X-Clan?
I don't remember X-Clan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember the name, but
okay.
Yeah.
So here's my sort of rudimentary understanding, because I know some guys who are Black Hebrew Israelites. I think the two main things are that black people in America are part of the 12 tribes of Israel. So that black folk are Jews to what Kanye is saying. Now, I don't know if he believes in Black Hebrew Israelite teaching or if he's pulling on a different thread. So it's that black people are Jews, and that when you read about Jewish customs and so on in the Old Testament, that is speaking to black people today. So there's a lot of emphasis on keeping the commandments and keeping customs and following, all of the laws down to a T. There's also the notion within Black Hebrew Israelite teaching that white people cannot be saved. So I believe they tend to refer to them as Edomites. So sometimes if you see Black Hebrew Israelites out on the street, they do a fair amount of street preaching, quote unquote, heavy air quotes. And sometimes what they'll do, if a white person is passing by, they'll have them read certain scriptures. They'll berate them publicly. If people remember the Covington situation with the kids from Kentucky, that part of that started when a group of Black Hebrew Israelites ended up in a verbal dispute with the kids from Covington. So it's those two things sort of working together. In some respects, even if it's not line for line, some of the teaching, I think, mirrors other black spiritual practices, whether it's Nation of Islam, basically that, or the 5%ers, the Nation of Gods and Earths, that there is a certain divinity within black people and within the black man, and there's a certain inherent evilness within white people and within the white man. That's the sort of the very basic gist of what we're talking about. I'm not sure, again, if that's what Kanye's drawing on, but that's my basic understanding of it.
Kanye, at later points in this interview, makes it crystal clear he's a Christian, and he basically argues, we're all in this together. So I think that part of it, he's probably not on board with, but I do think he's arguing, no, I'm a Jew, and because he says that repeatedly.
Right.
And that claim, am I reading Lex's body language or other people's reaction over social media, is the claim, a black person saying that they're a Jew, is that offensive to Jewish people?
It seems to be. I had a conversation with a Jewish person earlier this week, and we talked about that, and they were offended by that. And I actually asked them about these particular definitions. Semite in the dictionary is a member of a group of Semitic-speaking people of the Near East and Northern Africa, including the Arabs, Ethiopians, and Hebrews and Phoenicians. So I can understand why Kanye and many of them would actually say then that black people would be considered Semites, a big group of us, and I don't know why it's offensive if this is what the dictionary is saying a Semite is.
So my takeaway, again, rudimentary understanding, but, and I don't know if Kanye did this, but a lot of the movement, they'll say, they're not the real Jews. So it's not just saying that, hey, there's a lost tribe, black people are Jews too. They're saying, you guys are imposters. And that's where it becomes anti-Semitic.
And that's where I could see them being offended and saying, like, Kanye, even if you're not saying it that way, people are interpreting it. Other people are using that argument to say we're not really Jews.
And he may have actually said it on Tucker. If I'm remembering right, he said, I think black people are the real Jews. So he,
I feel like I feel like I remember him say something to that effect. But let me say this: Kanye is again pulling on a thread that I think if you pull on it hard enough will really expose a lot of theological confusion. Because, and I was talking to TJ and Shamik about this, there is a sense in which, particularly in America, you will hear black Christians talk about the Exodus story and place ourselves in the place of the children of Israel who had to escape slavery in Egypt, right? That's how you get Harriet Tubman sort of referred to as the Moses of her generation. Mm-hmm. But then the same people, when Earth, Wind, and Fire come on, they said, nah, we African, we Egyptians, we're kings, and they want to draw on the sort of historical dynasties of ancient African kingdoms from all across Africa. And there is a confusion there because when we do that, we don't engage in Egyptology or, talk about Pharaoh and say, oh, well, we can't really do that because, the Egyptians held slaves. We embrace all of it because of his regal nature. So there's a matter of flip-flopping. The other thing is, to Shamika's point, are there African Jews? Absolutely. Absolutely. But to my understanding, and unless somebody's willing to make this argument, the Africans who were sold into slavery and brought to this country, to my understanding, were not practicing Jews. Now, if somebody wants to say there's an entire group up and down the western coast of Africa, in Benin, and Nigeria, and Ghana, the Ivory Coast, who were Jews, and those are the people who were brought to America, and this is the religion that they practice in the South and other parts of the country, and this is the religion that now Kanye West practices, they would have a very hard time making that argument because Kanye West is on one hand saying he's the true Jew, but then also saying that he's a Christian. So there's a lot of theological confusion in this debate, generally speaking.
Well, his position, though, is that black people, having been heavily persecuted, are God's chosen people, and that's why he's calling them imposters.
Wait,
right?
is that what you think he's saying when he says black people are the real Jews?
Yes.
Okay.
And so this is, and again, don't know.
Okay.
Kanye is not very articulate in these interviews. He's all over the place. But I think the reason he's claiming this is because, look, we've been told all throughout the Bible, you're going to be persecuted. Christians, Jews obviously have been. And so he's talking to particularly the Ben Shapiro's of the world, the guys that are heavily religious. He's calling them imposters, and that the Holocaust, that was something different, that black people are the real Jews. We're God's chosen people, you're not.
Interesting. So I didn't, because I'm a literalist, right? I thought he was making a theological claim. It sounds like you're saying you think he's making a claim that Jewish equals oppression, black people have been oppressed for centuries, ergo black people are the real Jews.
Sounds like it to me.
Okay.
I'm listening to it again, second, third time here. Listened to it this morning. I can't disagree with Kanye's argument that this whole abortion thing that we seem all wrapped up in and its impact on American black people. I'll just keep it over here in America where, I live and am concerned. I'm not offended or upset that he's calling that a Holocaust. It's an analogy. It may be inaccurate, but I don't think it's offensive that Planned Parenthood and all the people that support abortion and its disparate impact, Ibram Kendi X, and any outcome that's not statistically supported or whatever is some sort of example of racism. And so the slaughter of black babies in the womb, I gotta agree with Kanye here and his analogy, and I know it's provocative, but I just don't, that shouldn't be offensive to Jewish people. And I don't think he's wrong, because what I hear him saying is like, these black artists the black artists that are making this death music and devaluing black life is at the heart of why abortion seems so central to us. And then he's saying that these black artists that are making this music, they're being supported and paid for, and the people profiting from it are Jewish people in the music industry. Black artists are profiting from it as well, but I don't understand why he can't call out those two groups without people being offended.
I doubt that religious Jews are offended by this, because typically, again, Ben Shapiro is maybe the most famous practicing Jew in America. He's so anti-abortion. 20 million black babies have been aborted since 1973, and 6 million Jews. And I get it that, he talked about the number difference and all that, but if you're concerned about human life, a conservative practicing Jew, I doubt they're offended by this. It's probably the secular Jews that would come in and say, don't compare anything to the Holocaust. Everything's dangerous when you talk about Jews.
TJ, I think just the way that conversations tend to go, any reference to Jewish people in any way that seems like a criticism, and in fact, it doesn't even have to be a criticism. The notion that, Jewish people have an outsized influence on media and culture, which is what the writer in the LA Times article said is a trope or a part of a narrative, that in and of itself is seen and described as anti-Semitic, right? So I agree with you in terms of Ben Shapiro, someone like Ben Shapiro saying, yes, I'm completely against abortion. I would assume, my guess would be his argument would say, well, stop saying that the Jews are behind it. And I don't even know that that's what Kanye was trying to say.
Yeah, that wasn't my takeaway at all.
Yeah, but...
And there is a big distinction to be made that abortion is not targeting one single group.
Correct.
There's tons of white babies, tons of
correct.
Jewish babies that are also... And so that would be the distinction they make.
Correct. And I think it's helpful in general because, again, we go from talking, like Kanye is going from talking about individuals to groups, and we do that a lot in our public commentary, to have a leveling place that says that there's no vice, no virtue that's inherent to any particular group, right? And I say that as a Christian first. So I know my Bible well enough to know that when Paul, the Apostle Paul is in Romans and listing out all of these sins, greed and malice and murder, he's talking about everybody. Yep. That is the one leveling place that everybody can be assured that no group gets to buy their way out of sin. So when you get into using these terms in terms of group level discussions, I make a distinction between a description and an explanation. And people do this all the time. I mean, if I watch Fox News or any conservative network, they don't have any problem running the string of videos with criminal suspects who happen to be black in large cities engaging in violent crime. And sometimes they'll say, 6% of the population accounts for 50% of all homicides. Right. And I got to eat that. Because the first question I ask myself is it true? Right. And I know the data well enough to know that it is true. But if a black commentator goes on there and says, well, 70% of the media companies in Hollywood are run by Jewish people, then all of a sudden that's off limits. So again, if we're using group level characteristics as a description to say, these are the people who do X, who run X, who finance X, that's one thing. But if we're using it as an explanation, these people do these things because of X, right? Because they are black, because they are Jewish, because they are white, then I think you get yourself in different, more dangerous territory.
Right. And I think the way we watched him cut him off and say, no, these are humans, like he wanted to not allow Kanye to say that these are the Jewish people that are doing this to him in the industry. But like you said, Delano, when it's the other way around, when you want to point out something that black people do, we have no problem with numbers. We have no problem characterizing it or grouping it, but he cut him off mid-sentence to then say, no, this is a human. Well, we don't do that in any other thing. We can look across media and see when we specify a black or a white. And I get when Kanye is saying, he's pretty much stating a fact. He doesn't really want the argument, I guess, on whether or not black people are Jews. He wants to bring it to 2022 and say, okay, like, I'm a Jew. But let's talk about what's happening right now. Opposed to spending a lot of time arguing about whether or not black people are Jews or black people are not, let's talk about this Holocaust, as he calls it, happening right now in 2022. And I think a lot of people are missing that.
I've not seen him, to your point, Delano, say they're doing this because they're Jewish. In fact, he later on says, we may get to it here, he's like, but they are Jews. They're people who happen to be Jews.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a large group of them.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference. And again, particularly the people on the right, if you would go on, there was a famous interview that Bill Maher had Sam Harris on, and they were talking about radical Islamic terrorists, right? And Ben Affleck lost his mind because he's like, you're going to attack the kid down the street, the Islamic kid who's got nothing to do with it. He's like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who are dropping bombs,
Right.
saying Allah Akbar, right? And then it blows up.
Right.
And we've got to be able to have this discussion. This, to me, is what Kanye's trying to do. And there's a lot of people that would acknowledge that, hey, you got to have this conversation. Radical Islamic terrorists, a tiny percentage of them are wreaking havoc in the Western world. We got to have this conversation. Mm-hmm. This, to me, is what Kanye's trying to do, albeit kind of clunky. And this is he's the Donald Trump.
I'm not sure if this interview did not feel clunky to me, and I actually think Kanye was on point. Particularly, again, he ain't Rush Limbaugh. He's not some super skilled broadcaster or whatever. But he seemed comfortable. He seemed to like this person and seemed to have command of the facts and information he wanted to unpack during this interview. It's I wish he were me. I'm watching this and I'm sitting there going, Kanye, because what Kanye's talking about is my point 1,000% that needs to be discussed, and he's forcing this conversation like, hey man, there's this secular Jewish element and black celebrities that have an unhealthy relationship that seems to come together to make money promoting a culture of death around black people. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about it.
Right.
Because if we can sit around and say Donald Trump and his rhetoric leads to X, Y, and Z, why can't we say, hey, this rhetoric around this particular style of music leads to X, Y, and Z? We all, no. That's a make-believe world. All the rappers with their long criminal rap sheets, they're not really trying to be criminals. I know they got criminal records, and I know they brag about crime and all the crimes they did, but that's make-believe. They're just Robert De Niro in Goodfellas. Right. They're just, cut it, because Robert De Niro doesn't play Robert De Niro in Goodfellas. Right. Marlon Brando didn't play Marlon Brando in The Godfather. He played Don Corleone. So I was very impressed so far with Kanye and all that I've watched. I thought he did a good job. And I can feel the hatred rising every time this music comes out. And again, I used to listen to it, but I know I can feel the hatred rising. And for Kanye to say, hey man, I want you to take some accountability. I want these black artists to take some accountability, but I also want the executives, the Jewish executives, just happen to take some accountability for this hatred. And I want to add this one little final point, because this is where Kanye is really going, or certainly where I'm going. I've lived long enough to see the puppet masters in the media and whoever the puppet masters are in the world, and they're not just Jewish people. It's everybody. I've seen them go. Jason Whitlock used to be very comfortable with the FAG word. And I've seen them make that reprehensible and despicable and uncool. And so you know what Jason Whitlock doesn't do? He don't use the FAG word anymore. I've seen it run out of sports. That used to be like one of the favorite words in sports. It's been run out. They said, you know what? No, we're not doing that anymore. It's uncool. It's unhealthy. We're not going to elevate the hatred around this group of people, gay people. They're protected. And so we're running this word and that kind of abuse out. But when it comes to somebody, Kanye, anybody saying, hey, this music y'all making and making billions of dollars off of, it's elevating hatred around black men, making our communities unsafe. Oh, that ain't our problem, or that's all make-believe, that music don't do that. Kanye's on solid ground here.
Go ahead, Shamika.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, everybody that acts like they don't understand what this man is saying, they are full of shit. Because it's clear. He has said more than one time that he doesn't mean all Jews. Even going back to the Drink Champs interview, he broke down exactly what he was saying, why he was saying it. When he said, this is the real anti-Semitism. I'ma your bitch. I'ma kill this nigga. I'ma your bitch. I'ma kill this nigga. He said, how many of y'all would bet your house that these type of lyrics aren't in the first 3 top songs on Apple Music? Like, he has been so clear as to what he is saying. And when they took that interview down, I knew for sure they're getting ready to railroad this man, because what I keep saying is he's talking over a lot of people's heads. That's why people are like, oh, he's crazy, or, you know, it's just that you're not listening to him and you don't want to hear what this man is saying because you are full of it. Like, I should have wore boots today because this is ridiculous. Like, he's been clear that he's not talking about all Jews, yet people keep trying to say that he's sending out this dog whistle and that he's trying to put
Let me
people
play
in
devil's
harm's
advocate,
way.
because I agree with you.
know.
But let me play devil's advocate, because all of us, we watch the media, we watched a ton of Kanye stuff, and so we know that. But a guy like Lex could be arguing, yeah, but what about the people who just see a little bit? Just see him say, hey, the Jews you're not the real Jews, and also you're wrecking black people. And that's all they see, just once. And so you and I and everybody else have seen that he's been very specific. He just did it in the last video. They happen to be Jews. He said it exactly that way, which I think if he said it that way all of the time, he'd be in less trouble. But he routinely will make a correction after broad brushing everyone, and that could be Lex's argument.
Well, what about when they say, and we don't want to keep doing whataboutisms, but this is what we do, and people should have the intellect to be able to add their own quantifiers. If you know it's not you, then you know it's not all Jews. It's like when they say black people love ham. I don't eat pork. So I automatically know it's not all black people, but, you know, it's a lot of black people that'll suck a ham bone. You know, I'm just not one of them. So it's like, I kind of see what they're saying, but I think they're playing, you know, it's like semantics. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're playing these games on purpose.
I think one of the things that's important is to be precise with language. And actually, I think about this a lot when I write. This is one of the reasons that all of my columns, if I'm trying to unpack a point, I name people specifically. And the reason why is because there's a difference between fooling with a water gun and dealing with nuclear weapons. So the more dangerous the weapon, the more precision you need. And I don't believe in collateral damage. And I'm not trying to kill, rhetorically speaking, 10 people to get one. So my thing is, and I think the Lex guy might have said this, it would be more powerful if Kanye West said this particular person, if he said Leor Cohen, when he was at Def Jam, told me that he's not platforming any artist unless that artist commits to mentioning the N-word X number of times, mentioning the B-word Y number of times. That to me would be much more powerful than speaking in generalities, because when you speak in generalities, what happens is that it creates a fertile ground for, you know, people will talk about the Illuminati. But it's just like, well, who is that? How am I supposed to focus on the people in the Illuminati if I don't even know who they are? And my thing is, Kanye West knows the people he's dealing with. They already canceled him, so now he should be even more freed up to speak. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I believe, again, I don't believe there's any individual, or if people want to play in groups, that's fine as long as we're all playing by the same rules, that is above criticism. I will say this, it does feel weak when black artists, whether it's Kanye, whether it's Diddy, whether it's Nori, whether whoever it is, Snoop, Jay-Z, I don't care who it is, say, black artists and black fans say, well, why don't the record labels stop us from making this music? Because what it ends up doing is saying, I have to appeal to white man law in order for me to behave myself.
Right.
And I reject that. Right? In the same way, if I lost my mind and I said, I'm going to exploit my kids, I'm going to sell my kids to the highest bidder. Yeah, you should ask yourself, what type of person would buy children on the black market? But the first question you should ask is, what type of father would sell his own children? And for the people that say that they speak for the black community, I love black people, I vote for everybody black, but you turn around and you push this garbage, you pump this garbage into our community in the same way you say that the white man pumping in Crown Fried Chicken and he's spiking the water. You do the same thing with culture. My first step is to address the artists, particularly the ones who have enough money where they don't have to do this.
Right.
So before I get to the record label execs, I want to know why they continue to take the money to sell us out.
You raise a heck of a point. Kanye, and I'm not, because he said so much and I listened to so much, he addresses this, and so I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because we haven't played the clip where he basically speaks to, like, you know, these artists are selected because they can be controlled. There's, you know, what's the dude's name? Baby from Cash Money Records? Or Baby.
The head?
Yeah. All tatted up, face, everything. This dude straight out of prison.
Yeah.
Birdman.
Yeah.
He go by Baby too. Yeah.
Birdman. He's a criminal. And he doesn't deny it. And I think before he became it's like he came out of prison to be a record executive. And so somebody gave him that platform. You know, he didn't earn it while making license plates in prison. It's like, well, we need a Negro that we can control, who's capable of violence and can go out and intimidate and rip off Lil Wayne and whoever else.
And kiss him in the mouth.
Yeah, and all of that. Yeah, all that behavior is normalized in prison. And so, again, Kanye's argument, and we'll get to it here in a second, is like, nah, they selectively choosing who gets these roles. And again, it's why Jay-Z is so, because he was a drug dealer. And he's rapped about being a drug dealer. And they got a FBI file on all these guys. And I sound like a tinfoil hat, Black Alex Jones. I don't care. It's factual because I see it playing out, and we'll get into it. I see it playing out in my industry the same way. All people get installed in these positions, and maybe it's not because of their criminal record. Maybe it's because there's an HR file a block long on them on who all they've sexually harassed at that job. And so they own those people. And so when they bring them into the office, say, I need you to say this, 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 and this, they have no choice because they can get rid of that. Well, you know, if you don't cooperate, you know, we can get rid of you, and you're not going to make this $3 million a year, $4 million a year. And with all them baby mamas you got, you need this money, or you're going to have to significantly change your lifestyle. And that's why they can go on TV. Skill. You know they be racist, Skill. Because he knows they got an HR file.
He does sound like a runaway slave.
He ain't ran very far, trust me. He's on anyway. So he gets to your point. Call them out individually. And I think that sounds great on paper until the defamation lawsuits start rolling in.
Yeah.
And I think we've gone through the Alex Jones situation that ain't no telling which direction lawsuits will how they'll pan out, which direction they'll spin. Kanye has said, we're in this world now where Kanye has said he didn't even have his knee on his neck like that. And he's getting sued for $250 million. And it's spun out in the media, in whoever controls the media. Let's act like no one specific. Whoever the individuals are in control of the media spun that out as Kanye said George Floyd didn't die because of Derek Chauvin. The man said he didn't have his knee on his neck like that. The media spun it out as this declarative statement of how George Floyd died. And now it's powered a lawsuit. And because of what we just saw in the Alex Jones deal, a jury, based on emotion, based on narrative, can come up with any verdict they want and award however much money. And so if you start calling these super powerful, super rich, connected with every good lawyer in town out.
On the right, you'll hear people, I've seen Tucker Carlson do this, say, use the phrase Soros-backed DAs. But on the left, they say, criticism of George Soros is anti-Semitism. And one of the things that's actually ironic about this conversation is that I believe that, generally speaking, and I'm going to speak in group generalities now, that black people and Jewish people in this country have very similar ways and characteristics as it relates to public criticism. Because in the same way criticism of George Soros is spun as, anti-Semitic, criticism of Maxine Waters or Barack Obama or LeBron James is spun as racist. Even when the person's not even talking about either their skin color or their religion. So there's a similarity there. In the same way, if you criticize Jewish people, that's going to lead to anti-Semitic attacks. If you criticize black people, that's going to lead to hate crimes. If this is how the Holocaust started, this is how we're going to end up back in Jim Crow. There's a lot of parallels in those two sort of situations. One of the big differences is the asymmetry there, because the black elite are more protective of the people they say have no power, because you couldn't get Nori, you couldn't get all the political commentators, the analysts, you could Ilhan Omar, Mark Lamont Hill, to denounce the garbage that's pumped on BET or that comes out of Hollywood. But when Kanye West says what he says, right, even the George Floyd stuff, then all of a sudden everybody's apologetic. And I was saying to Shamika earlier, Nori had on Irv Gotti, former head of Murder Inc. CEO, and Irv was recounting a relationship that he claimed he had with Ashanti 20 years ago. He called her the B word. He's talking under her clothes, and they slept together, and they did this. Nori didn't apologize for any of that. So it's one of those things where the message is clear. If the people that you're degrading and denigrating and criticizing are black men or black women, if you're promoting crime, degradation, self-destruction, you have a free pass. Regardless of who's running it, regardless of who is the mouthpiece for it, you have a free pass. Not only do you have a free pass, we'll pay for it. We're the NFL. We believe in black lives. We stand against the oppression of black people. But we're going to hire, Snoop and Dr. Dre and whoever. We're going to platform Meek Mill as he drives his bus with his album cover with naked black women on the front of it with little, pixelated things over their private parts. We promote that. We promote that to our people. But if you criticize certain people in certain groups, if you say, well, I'm not sure I believe that the NFL is gay. Oh, no, that's NFL conversion therapy. We can't have that. Then it's like, okay, now you can't criticize. So I think at a certain point, people just got to, look, this is the standard, and we're going to hold everybody to the same standard. But clearly, we're not there yet.
Yeah, and I think it's clear to Kanye that these people that have spewed all this hate, all this gangster music, I'm a gangster, I'll do this, I'll do that, are really weak. They're not going to have his back. When Ice Cube came out and said, I don't know where he gets the idea. Like, Ice Cube, we heard you for years tell us that Jerry Heller, who was a Jewish music executive, was evil. Like, we heard you saying these things over and over and over again.
It wasn't just Jerry Heller, though. He used the word Jew.
Right,
the
he
whole
did.
crew.
Devils, he called them devils.
Yeah.
Like, so how now can you say you don't know where this came from? Like, he put out a whole picture of like this Monopoly board that was on the backs of black men with a bunch of white or Jewish men, it looks, sitting around the table and said, all we have to do is stand up. Well, you have Kanye trying to stand up, and now you have people like you being weak that, I don't know where that came from. This is what you've been pushing into our minds for years. And so it's just, I don't know, for me, it's really crazy to hear people act as if they you should name names. He's not going to have the support because people have already started to just kind of throw him to the wolves. And he has black people and Jewish people mad at him right now because the black people are mad that he wore the White Lives Matter shirt. Black people are saying, you know what, they didn't care when he was being anti-black. So they consider him saying, you know, slavery was a choice as anti-black. So it's like he has two groups mad at him now simply for saying, I mean, I got what he meant when he said slavery was a choice. Like, he wasn't saying they signed up for it. He was just saying, hey, why wasn't it maybe more, you know, rebellions or, you know, he's looking at today and seeing how people willingly go along with BS to understand how they willingly went along with a lot of stuff then.
So the question is, what would be most effective, right? Because he's broad brushing the industry right now, and that is a way to do it. This is, again, I compare him to Donald Trump because he says, Mexicans are coming across our border, they're raping our women, they're committing murder, and they're like, he's like, well, if you're a Mexican and you're here and you're not doing that, I'm not talking about you. And so, but what happened is it got a crowd of people to be able to say, Trump's a racist, he hates all Mexicans. And so, for Kanye, because you're talking about the lawsuits, he's worth about $2 billion. And I understand the courts have some serious power. Alex Jones is being sued for $2.75 trillion right now. So I get it. But I would assume a guy that's been in the industry for this long probably has some receipts. And can you, if you need to go to court over it, and somebody wants to sue you for defamation, and you've got the money to back up the lawyers in the short term, then call out the very specifics. And you say, I'm not going to name the guys that I can't prove it, but it's this way across the industry. And here's the three I know about.
Let's say he called out Jimmy Iovine. That's Dr. Dre's guy, and Beats by Dre, and he's connected to LeBron James, and LeBron James' son now has a Beats by Dre endorsement deal or whatever. And my point is, all of these guys that he would be calling out by name have their little army of black elite celebrities that are beholden to them that will come out and, that ain't the Jimmy Iovine I know. I mean, Jimmy been good to me.
Right.
I mean, holy cow.
There's probably a line of bodies of guys they've screwed just like Kanye, though.
That you've never heard of.
Right.
Yeah.
That and would mean nothing. Oh, you mean that worthless person that, again, that they would be all inconsequential compared to the people that would come out and speak on, oh my, Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine gave USC $70 million. And all of the people caping up for him, and then it would be, yeah, Jimmy Iovine screwed over Leroy Washington from Compton. And have you seen his criminal record, or you know, or how many baby mamas he's got, or whatever? It sounds good calling out the individuals.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's not, because I've called out people by name my entire career. I'm not saying, but I think what is being most effective, and I'll just say it, I think Trump's strategy has been effective. It's created a conversation that has awakened a lot of people, and we'll get there now. I think somebody was saying before the show, either you or Delano, Trump created Ron DeSantis. And so eventually Kanye kicking up all this dust is going to create his version of Ron DeSantis. There will be somebody who can stand in the pocket and make this argument very articulate that everybody's gonna have to listen to. But Kanye right now is just the conversation he had with this Lex guy. Important. This was a very lucid, easy to understand Kanye West in a long format with someone he's clearly comfortable with, that he put his arguments together a lot better than what I've seen previously.
So one thing that's really interesting, because you mentioned Jimmy Iovine, right? And according to Wikipedia, Jimmy Iovine is Italian, grew up in Brooklyn. But you get some of the same criticisms of Puff, of P. Diddy, that he screws over artists, that he doesn't deal fairly. Some of the very artists that he helped make famous, Mace and other people, Locks, have said, he locked us in these bad contracts. He owes us money, and I think this is where, and again, Kanye can, say something profound and then ridiculous, within seconds of each other. But this is where I feel like Kanye, who describes himself as a Christian, would do better to speak from a biblical perspective. Because again, then you have whether the person running the company or the label is Italian, or they're from the American South, or they're black, or they're Jewish, or they're Eastern European. It's the behavior that we should be getting at. And that behavior is either dealing unfairly with people, pressuring and coercing people into promoting certain values that are self-destructive, or people who are pushing an agenda, using music and media to push an agenda that someone else, who I don't know who it is all the time, that somebody else is paying for. You can't tell me that there are not powerful interest groups that are not using the media today to push everything related to LGBT. It's clear as day. Disney, Nick Jr., any content aimed at kids is pumping that stuff out 24 hours a day. Somebody's behind that. When I was doing my research today and I sent you all a picture and I went to CAA's website, because again, I'm prior to meeting my wife, I'd never been west of Chicago, so I don't know anything about California and LA or whatever. And I go to the CAA Foundation. I thought they're going to be digging wells in Africa, giving kids clean water. The first picture that was up there was Dwayne Wade, Gabrielle Union, and they call the boy Zaya now. You could tell it was a couple years ago because he's short. Now he done sprouted up. And I'm saying to myself, so the first picture that you see on CAA's foundation is promoting the notion that a boy can become a girl and vice versa. That is not by accident. So my thing is this, I don't care who is doing it. I don't care who's financing it. I don't care who's signing the check. I want to go after the behavior. We talked about this Friday. The Breakfast Club flies the pride flag. I don't see any Christian crosses in there. Now everybody in there is, I'm spiritual and not religious, and they want to talk about God. But when it comes down to it, there are people who are financing, promoting, and the spokespeople for certain types of agendas that to me are godless and want to turn people away from the truth. And I think those people should be named.
Thank you for correcting me on Jimmy Iovine. I appreciate that, and you are right. So he starts off saying, Jewish people have no control over, did I hear that right? Have no control. Let's play the whole thing over again.
There's no control of the media by Jewish people.
You're an engineer, brother. If you're an engineer and you're not holding to the truth, that's not.
And Kanye cuts him off and was like, hey, man, come on, let's get out of La La Land. Let's move into the real world. It's almost like black people have no control over the NBA.
Right.
What do you mean? Come on now. Let's cut it out. We dominate the NBA. And again, we mentioned it earlier about there's a trope that Jewish people have an outside influence over these media companies. And I was like, man, I wish they put some of these tropes on us. Black people, the good ones. Right. Black people got too much control over money. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll take it. But that's all. Nope. No, we don't. We have no influence over media or whatever. I think Kanye's on solid ground, and Lex and this whole trope deal is silly.
I'll tell you where black people do have an outside influence is impacting culture. And so this is why this is such a big deal.
That's very offensive.
The people that are impacting culture are controlled by someone who's paying them. And that's what Kanye's getting at.
Yeah. And to your point, when you said, black people have an outsized influence on the NBA, I said, because I think what this Kanye situation reveals is that there is a difference between labor and management. It doesn't matter what income level you're at, because at the end of the day, if what's the young guy? He played for the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards, I think. He had a video where he saw a couple of guys. I don't know what the guys were doing.
Several guys out in L.A.
Out in L.A.
Yeah.
And he used some choice language. I heard about it first before I saw the video, and it's always good to see the difference in terms of the characterization. So he said something. I think he might have used.
Might have used the F word.
No.
That was a Q word.
The Q word.
Yeah,
he
that's
said
right.
these queers or something to that effect. But he also used the N word in describing them. Use it in a more
Queer
general.
N word,
Correct.
I think. Yeah.
Yep.
And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, here he come. He dusting off his Black Power outfit. Everybody said that this young guy had to apologize, and he did. And when I quote tweeted, I said, "Well, is he apologizing for the N word part or just the Q word part?"
No.
Because we know that who can be offended and who cannot be offended. And to your point, Jason, even watching live NBA games, you will hear the N word coming across the broadcast, whether it's Kevin Durant saying to Rudy Gobert, "You are a BAN," or other guys saying it. So I think like there's a difference between the people who constitute the majority of a workforce and who has the power. And ultimately, the person whose name is on the check has the power. That doesn't mean that the workforce doesn't have influence, because the players in the NFL definitely made the NFL owners and Roger Goodell cry uncle during, from the Kaepernick years, the Kaepernick era.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when it comes down to it, one group can fire the other, and I think that's clear. One of the things that you see throughout history is that small minority groups, even within a broader cultural context, can make a lot of headway. And there's certain countries in which the minority group will control an entire industry, right? And one of the things, and I was saying this to Shamika and TJ, I think a lot of the rappers tend to mention Jewish people in their lyrics because there's a certain amount of envy there. They say, well, these are the guys, you're talking maybe 2-3% of the population. These are the guys who own the buildings in parts of Brooklyn, who, these are the lawyers, these are the accountants. And my thing is this, I think one of the best things that anybody could take away from these conversations, and there's all different types of issues, anti-Semitism, racism, so on and so on and so forth, is looking at any group of people and saying, that group of people, generally speaking, has tended to be successful across generations on different continents because they do a handful of things. They're faithful to their religion. They are dogged about building strong families. They are interested in pursuing excellence in different industries. And they believe in, sort of cooperative economics of one type or another. Any group could take that pattern and say, we're going to do certain things. Because at the end of the day, Steven Spielberg would make Schindler's List. Steven Spielberg is not going to sign off, and a lot of Jewish artists are not going to sign off on things in which people are using the K word, right? Slurs for Jewish people. And you see women in their traditional dress, and they're shaking their booty and all sorts of other stuff. And you see little kids with yarmulkes on, and they pulling on the reefer. They're not doing that. Now they'll say, if the black people want to do it, like, what Don Corleone said, right? They said, sell it to the Negroes, because these people, they'll do that type of stuff to each other. So it's like, I don't blame other communities, other groups for having high standards. I just wish the people who say that they represent black folk would elevate their standards, and that we, and this is where the consumers come in, right? Because at the end of the day, we got to be honest. We have a desire for it. We want the garbage. We want to eat the garbage. And one thing with Shamika and I, we were talking about yesterday, one thing the black Muslims did, the Nation of Islam, they said, Elijah Muhammad Farrakhan said, y'all got to get off the pork. They didn't say, we're going to boycott Smithfield and Oscar Mayer. They said, no, y'all need to get off the pork. It's bad for you. It's bad for your diet. And if you're a person who stays true to that particular belief system, one thing I can know for sure is if I come to your house, you're not going to have ham hocks and fat back and all sorts of other type of meat in there. And what I'm saying is we have to do the same thing for our culture and say, we have to get off of this garbage. It's killing us from the inside out. And until then, I'm not looking to any other group to do that for us. I think that's something we could do for ourselves.
The thing I loved about what Lex just, he's talking to a billionaire.
Right.
And he's, You can be a media mogul. You can be a music media mogul. Do it.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things Kanye did say in the Drink Champs interview. He said, if anything, I'm jealous. Like, Jewish people are not pushing this type of information on other Jewish people. They're not killing their kids at the same rate that we are in the black community. So he did actually say that, like, this is something that we have to do better as black people.
And I may be jumping ahead here, but if I am, we'll just play the clip when he gets there. But he said, like, I was the face of a label. I just didn't have any idea what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
Not sure if we have that clip, but he definitely did say that.
And so for him, it's like, well, hey, man, you got $2 billion and you're obviously on like a world.
Kanye says he's got 10 or 11 billion.
There you go. So he's on a world-wrecking tour. Well, is this the next step? Because he's not making it clear. Lex is the one who's telling him, hey, start your own stuff and let's go here. If you want to make a difference, you can headline this.
Kanye does say, and I don't know if we have this clip, but he does say in the interview at some point that and he wasn't talking about what you're talking about specifically, but he was making the point of like, hey, we were building something, he and the Kardashians. And he said something like, Kylie wasn't a billionaire yet. And then, but he walks you through, in his mind, all the things that were done to destroy what they were building. And it indicated to me that Kanye, he didn't fully explain it, but it indicated to me, it was like, oh, so when Kanye and the Kardashians are sitting around at a table, they have a plan for all of these, for them to acquire all this wealth, and here's what we're gonna do to impact culture. And Kanye believes that people set about undermining him, the family, and the whole vision. That this is, that there's some guy named Virgil that he says, and I don't know who Virgil is.
Yeah, he's a fashion designer who passed away, I think maybe last year or earlier this year.
Yeah. And he said something like, I wouldn't be divorced from Kim right now if XYZ didn't happen.
Yeah.
So, because if you put all of Kanye's interviews together, he sees himself as this amazing influencer. He sees Kim Kardashian as this amazing influencer, and they're acquiring all this wealth. So I can see in Kanye's mind the way he thinks. They're having all these conversations. Kim, me and you are about to change the world, and we're going to acquire all this wealth, and we're going to be the controllers of the fashion industry and the blah, 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 blah. And he thinks, you know, some people set to tear that whole thing down. And then I've certainly, you know, again, I believe Kim Kardashian's a witch, and I've dealt with a witch, and you know, a sexual demon that man, they're hard to shake. And so I just think his walk is going to look a lot different than a lot of people's. Same goes for Donald Trump. Who knows what, you know, he held up a Bible upside down and 2 Corinthians.